He had spent his whole life exploring the Middle East, a man familiar with the mysterious inscriptions and hieroglyphs of the pharaohs, and what they might reveal about the biblical stories.
David Rohl, author, historian, and Egyptologist, is an agnostic, someone who remains unconvinced of the existence of God. Yet, he clearly sees archaeological evidence of the biblical Joseph, Jacob, and the early Hebrews in the Nile Delta region of Egypt. Rohl believes that many Egyptologists have missed evidence for the Exodus because they have been looking for it in the wrong time period. While most scholars think that the events of the Exodus happened in the New Kingdom, David Rohl's view would put the Exodus in an entirely different period, the earlier Middle Kingdom, where he claims evidence for the Exodus can be seen.
I wanted him to explain why he had come to such a different conclusion than Manfred Bitech about Joseph and the early Israelites. Tell me, who is Manfred Bitech?
Manfred Bitech is probably one of the greatest archaeologists alive today, and he's dug at one of the most important sites in the Eastern Delta, a city called Avaris, which is in the land of Goshen, which the Bible calls it, and I believe this is the place where Joseph and his brethren lived.
Well, I went to see Manfred Bitech.
Right.
And that's not what he said. He said there's no evidence of this at the time of Ramesses.
Exactly right. Most scholars will say if you look at the city of Ramesses, there are no Asiatics there. There are no Western Asiatics living at that particular city. But dig down a little bit deeper, and you do find a city full of Asiatics.
Yeah, but the Bible says it happened at the time of Ramesses. Mm-hmm. What are you saying?
I'm saying that this particular mention of the city of Ramses, the building of Ramses, is what we call an anachronism. It's something that's been added into the text later by an editor. Mm-hmm. So what the editor is basically saying is, this is the place where the Israelites built the store city, and we know it today as Ramesses. Well, but in the ancient times, it was called Avaris.
Okay, so the people would know the area, the region.
The people of the Bible would have known where Ramesses was and where, therefore, their ancestors actually built the city.
I also found that the Bible, in the book of Genesis, uses the word Ramesses hundreds of years before Pharaoh Ramesses or his city existed to describe the land where Joseph's family settled. So if the name Ramesses in Genesis does not refer to the time of Pharaoh Ramesses II, then why should the mention of Ramesses in the book of Exodus be any different?
Now this Avaris is the city which lies under the biblical Ramesses, Ramesses of the New Kingdom, Avaris of the Middle Kingdom, the 13th dynasty. It lies underneath the city that's mentioned in the Bible. So when Bitech digs up a huge population of Semitic-speaking peoples with Semitic culture living in the city of Avaris for several hundred years, and then, at the end of the period, these Semites all leave, depart with their belongings and abandon the city, whatever Manfred says, that to me sounds awfully like the Israelites.
Well, what he told me was that there was no connection.
Well, look at the evidence that you've got here.
Right at the beginning, at the heart of this community, at the end of the 12th dynasty,
we see a Syrian house appear. The Austrians call them Mittelsaal houses. This type of house is found in North Syria, the area where Abraham came from. It's exactly the same style of house you'd expect Jacob to build for himself in Egypt. And we know that the Israelites sought their brides from Haran in that region. They all went back to get their brides from there. So the culture that turns up in Egypt at the end of the 12th dynasty seems to have come from North Syria originally.
So what is the connection with Joseph out of Avaris?
Well, after this house of Jacob, if we can call it that, is built, eventually it's flattened, and on top of it, an Egyptian palace is constructed, Egyptian architecture this time. However, the occupant was not Egyptian.
The palace had courtyards, colonnades, audience chambers. There was even a robing room.
It obviously belonged to some high official of state who was very, very important to that state. Because when somebody gets a palace like this given to them, it means they're being honored for what they've done for the state.
Now in the garden behind the palace, the archaeologists found 12 main graves with memorial chapels on top of them.
You have 12 graves?
We have 12 graves.
And why would that be significant?
Well, think about it. How many sons did Jacob have? How many tribes were there?
12 tribes.
Exactly. And what's also amazing is the palace had a facade, a portico with 12 pillars. Mm-hmm. So you've got 12 sons, 12 tribes, 12 pillars, and 12 tombs.
Interesting.
Yeah, is that all coincidence?
Now, one of these 12 graves was very special because it was a pyramid tomb. This in itself is extraordinary because only pharaohs and queens had pyramid tombs at this time. Yet the person buried in this tomb was not a king. Even so, he was honored with a king's burial. And inside the chapel of the tomb was a statue. What we know from the statue is that this man had red hair. He had pale yellow skin, which is how Egyptians depict northerners. He had a throw stick across his shoulder, a unique symbol of office made for this Asiatic official living in the land of Goshen. And on the back of his shoulder, we see the faintest remains of paint, colored stripes from a multicolored coat.
And that matches exactly with the story of Joseph in the Bible. The multicolored coat is a gift which shows that he was the favorite of the father. And it almost becomes his insignia, this coat. It's the thing we remember about him most of all.
Do you know of any other statues of a Semite of this kind in Egypt?
There is nothing else like this in the whole of Egyptian history.
Really?
Nothing at all.
David Rohl is not the only one to see a connection with Joseph at Avaris. Mahoney went to see Professor Charles Ayling, an Egyptologist who has also investigated the events of the Exodus and its connection to Egypt.
Would it be unusual for a tomb to have a statue?
No. It's unusual to have one this large. This would be probably twice the size of a normal human being.
What does that tell you when the statue's larger?
That it's a very important person. Now, of course, this is not a pharaoh's tomb or palace, but the man who lived there, you can identify his nationality by looking at the fragments of the statue. Three things: the hairstyle he has, which we often call the mushroom hairstyle, and then secondly, the weapon he carries over his shoulder called a throw stick, which we would associate with like an Australian boomerang, and then the coloration of the skin. The skin is yellow. All those things indicate that this would have been a Syro-Palestinian.
Dr. Ayling, do you think this is Joseph?
Either it is Joseph or it's somebody that has a career remarkably the same as Joseph did. It's just an incredible thing to find this at this time period.